welcome to another CreativMotion tutorial. In this tutorial we're going to be taking a look at the situation where you might need to export, say, an object buffer for a single clone. Now there's a few different ways we can do that, but I'd like to try to figure out a way to keep everything parametric. So obviously you could convert the cloner down. You could put on whatever tags, whatever object buffers you need to pop on there and IDs, but then that breaks your workflow. So we're going to be looking at a couple of different ways of keeping everything parametric. So using selection tags, and also working with a bit of XPresso as well to get things set up and rigged and working a little bit more efficiently. So we'll even have recyclable tags that we can save out, pop onto cloners, and that should help us then to repeat the process again with future projects. So first up, let's just take a quick look at the scenario. So if I just pop a cube into the scene, and we just pull this into a cloner object, and we'll just swap the mode to radial, and then just obviously pull it out a little bit, decrease the number of clones, just zoom out a little bit in the viewport here. Okay, so the situation we've got is we need an object buffer just for, say, one of these clones or maybe a couple of these clones, but you only have the option here to either put the object buffer on the clone or on the cloner, but when we do that, it's going to apply the object ID for obviously all the clones, because the tret is like one complete object. So that can be a bit of an issue. One of the workarounds is to, if you were to hit C on this, we can convert that down, and then we have a list of individual clones, and we can apply whichever tags we need to any of these. But if we need to go back and we need to change anything in terms of like the timing for MoGraph, or anything that we've initially set up that's parametric, we just don't have that control. So it kind of breaks, the workflow breaks at that point. So there's a couple of things you can do with using the selection tag. So basically we can drop on a selection tag here, and we can highlight one individual clone, say, and then we pull in a plane effector. Now let's just check. Yeah, the plane effector is on there. And what we can do is we go down and check visibility, and then we go back into the effector and we slightly reduce the maximum value here. You can see it's just kind of popping in, and one of the other things we also need to switch off the position as well. So let's go and switch off position. So this the visibility of that clone is completely disabled at that point. Okay, so we've hidden that clone, and what we need to do is replace that individual clone with another object. And probably one of the cleanest ways to do that would be to select the original object, then just create an instance of that, and then what we're trying to do is try to reposition that clone in the same position. And there you go, you can see we'll have obviously all this is one object, and then we've got an individual object here to apply some extra tags like compositing tags, and we can pop on object buffers onto this. Okay, and what we want to do is just pull in this cube instance here. Then we want to right click, go new node, XPresso, motion graphics, and use the data node. And then we'll just pull the object to object onto this. Okay, and then we'll just pull out the global matrix. Sorry, let's break that. This goes over this side. export on that. So what we actually want to do is pull in the cloner. So we want to pull the positional data from the cloner. So link object to object. So the MoGraph data node knows to reference this. Now what it's doing is it's just obviously referencing each clone depending on the index number, and we can choose whichever that might be, from 0 up to how many clones that we have. And what we want to do is link the global matrix to the global matrix of the instance, and you can see immediately it's just popped that new instance of the cube into the correct position. We can work up the XPresso a little bit more, so these move together maybe with the selection tags, and I'll show you a way of doing that later on. But you can see what you can do is obviously once you made your selection, we've made a selection here, we've hidden that clone, we've created an instance of the clone, and then what we've done is kind of positioned that clone in the correct position based on the index number. So if that wasn't the correct clone, what we can do is go into the data node and we just move this value around until we find the right selection point for it. And then what we can do here obviously is we can select the cube, go to tags, Sim4D tags, go to compositing, object buffer, and enable an object buffer. So another way I thought about doing this would probably to use the cloner to drive a sequence of cubes or clones. So we'd hide the cloner, but the positional data and all the MoGraph would drive all the individual objects. And because we have individual objects, we can apply the compositing tags onto whichever clones that we like, and that would work fine. But the only thing that's actually driving there is the global matrix, so that's scale, position, and rotation. And it wouldn't quite understand if you try to use like some of the some of the like kind of blend modes, mixing modes. If you had lots of different kind of clones, different objects linked into the cloner, it would start to get complicated. So the cleanest way I thought about doing this is just to focus on one particular clone at the time. If that's what the only thing you need to do, that it takes complication out. It means you can focus a lot more on the original MoGraph. So everything's as parametric as possible, and the only thing you're actually changing is just hiding one individual clone and replacing that individual clone with an instance of itself. So you can still, we could go back, we could add more effectors to this, we can tweak the animation, we could even alter the original cube, the original objects, and it will update with this version. So if we just go in here and we just kind of start changing the size, you can see because this instance, it's going to update on this cube here that's already set up with its object buffers. So we have to, once we make those changes, we're not redoing work again, and this is good to go. Just kind of create all the multipasses that we need to create from this. So that's quite a simple way of doing this. Now there are other ways that you can do this. I'll just show you this other technique. Now this is just really an extension of what I've just shown before. So we're using the same principles. What we're doing is we've got a sequence of clones, we're hiding one of the clones, and we're just replacing it with an instance or an object or whatever we like. I mean, you can see this is quite a powerful technique. So using the same thing, maybe you might not want to use this for creating an individual object buffer. Maybe you might want to use this just to swap out an individual clone, and just have that control. So there's lots of things you can do with this. So if I just double click on the XPresso, it looks a bit crazy at the moment, but essentially what we're doing here is we've got the original XPresso here. So if we focus on, say, this data node like we did before with the cube instance, this is basically just picking up the position point So it's position. So it's using the index here from some user data. So let's just click on this tag. So on this tag, we've got two link slots here. So we can pop this tag on a cloner, and then we can just pull in the name of that cloner. So it knows which clone to reference and where to pull that data from. And we can pop in the individual object that we need. So we can pop in, which will probably be just an instance of the original clone, or the original cube, say. But you know, if you want to swap that out, you could do that. You could just pull a different object into this slot, and it will replace that individual object. Now, what it's doing is it's reading this index number here. This index number refers to each one of the individual clones as we go around. So, like before, if we got this selected as, say, index number 1, from here, from this user data, is feeding into this data now. So, this will be reading, it's the first clone. So we want to find the positional data, the sort of global matrix of that first clone, and then move that instance to the same position. Okay, so it's doing that. It's doing that quite easily there. Now the rest of the XPresso is using is linking in this MoGraph selection tag. So and this does get a little bit more complicated, just because of the way it works. But essentially, what it is doing, it's using this same index number to reference an individual selection on this. So, in a nutshell, it's basically saying index number 1 is the user data, so it's kind of being fed through. It's saying to this selection tag, I want this to be selected. Okay, so once that's selected, then again the plane effector can affect the visibility and switch it off. So we can cycle through here. We can go through and change this. Now you can see this index number is then swapping out. So at the moment, what it's doing here is obviously deleting the visibility of that clone, moving that cube instance to that position. So as we cycle through, what it's doing is it's deleting the visibility of the next clone, and then moving the cube instance to that position, and then keeps it clean. I mean, it means you can cycle through and you can choose whichever clone you want, and you could adapt XPresso to affect certain ranges of these if you like. But this is just generally to give you an idea of how you might approach this problem. The way the MoGraph selection tags work, to kind of define, because this really confused me at first. I mean, how these work. So they don't work kind of, or give you a direct kind of index number. So you can link that to a particular clone. What it kind of works, the way it works is with hierarchy or with iteration. So in short, the iteration is basically it's going through. We've got 2 iteration nodes here, and it's iteration through all of the clones. For the selection tag, and on one of these selections you have this option here, so you have this option to pull out a select. So you can do that by just going, tapping on here and pulling out select, and you can check one of these boxes. Now if we go to the help, it'll tell you here. So this setting lets you decide if a Boolean value should be used to determine whether or not the clone defined via index should be selected. Now, the way that works, it kind of works off just a Boolean function, as in when the iteration goes through both of these, if that Boolean value is triggered, then it makes the selection on the selection tag here. It's obviously doing that per frame. So this iteration is kind of offset. So to select one or just individual select clone with that selection tag, your iterations just slightly offset in front of itself. So when it iterates through, it will iterate up to whatever reference number it might be. It will select one and then iterate through the rest. So it's only setting that Boolean value true for the one single selection point. One of the other things to bear in mind as well is it's quite important in terms of the way that the XPresso is being read as well, because some of this might not function properly unless it's in the right hierarchy. So as we know with the object manager, things are kind of read from top to bottom, and it works the same way in XPresso as well. So if you're working at how this is being calculated and in what particular order, you can and things are kind of seem to at the moment to be like staggered all over the place, what you can do is you can select these and just move them up just to be in the correct position of where they should be. So your first calculations should be at the front, your final calculations will be later on in the process. So if things are not working, it could be to do with maybe the ordering of all these. So going back to this, we'll just pop on a cube instance just to show how it could work. Compositing tag, select the object buffer, just go to the render settings here, just go to multi-pass, add on a object buffer, and we've made sure that's the same number, same number on there. Let's not save this. Make sure it's set to a current frame, and we'll just render this to the picture viewer. And just make sure this object buffer is working. Single pass, and there you go. You can see we've got the object buffer working there. So if we need to change that to a different number, let's just cycle back through. So you can see it's now highlighting that one, particular one. Let's render this again. Yeah. So now we've got a different object buffer on a different clone. So this is working fine. This is exactly how we run it, and it gives us a lot more control over compositing in post. So generally, like what you'll do here and how you'll set things up will be defined about what you really want to achieve in post production. So just to also show you the possibilities of certain things you can do with this. So let's just pull in something completely random like a cone in here. And we go back to the selection tag. So like I said, we're referencing cloner, and then we're referencing this object buffer. Now let's say this might be a replacement object. So if we pull in the clone to this point, we're swapping out that object there. And you can't see it because it's actually inside this cube instance. So we just switch this off and say let's go back to this, and we just cycle through. We can swap clones out, whichever position we like. So there's lots of things you can do. You have a lot of control over the the cloner object at this point. You can pretty much define exactly how you want it to work. So I hope you've found this useful, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.